Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have with us today Faris Aranki. He began his career as a globetrotting school teacher, explored journalism and police work, then entered strategy consulting before establishing his own firm to enhance business effectiveness. Now, frequently invited to share his insights through podcasts, magazines, and conferences, he champions the open exchange of ideas to make the world a better place. Faris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you and all the listeners/watchers, just everyone out there. Great to be with you.
We're excited to dig into a few of these items here for sure. But before we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today was,
Yes.
which cartoon character do you resonate with the most?
Okay, well, I'm sat here in London, UK, and so I'm going to go for a British cartoon character that many people, hopefully it'll send you to Wikipedia, Google to look up. It's a character called Banana Man. This was a character I used to read about and watch on TV as a kid. Quite simply, it was a character, a schoolboy called Eric Wimp, who was very nerdy, very wimpy, but every time he ate a banana, he became this superhero called Banana Man, and he would go around the world fixing problems. He was set against a set of bundling baddies, and he always came out there. But fundamentally, the reason it resonates for me is that's how I think we all feel, or I certainly feel a lot of days, is that while I turn up as Banana Man, deep down I'm just that 8-year-old kid who happened to eat a banana. At least that's how I feel. So it's great to be able to move between the two, be a bit Peter Panish, but I think we could all be a bit more Banana Man and a bit less Eric Wimp at times, but we all have a Banana Man inside of us. So that's the cartoon character that resonates with me.
Well, it's certainly an interesting one. A lot of connotations there. I know. Was it an older cartoon by chance, or was it is it a newer?
I think it first came out in late 80s. So there you go. I'm showing my age as well.
Oh well, no. And now I was just reminiscing on similar cartoons. So I guess like Popeye, but he ate spinach and instead of bananas.
It's like I was teaching the other day. There's basically only 8 stories in the world, and they just get recycled over and over. So I'm not surprised there's plagiarism in cartoons. This was in a comic book called The Beano and the Dandy. I don't know if those ever made it over to the Canada or the US, but I suspect it's a very British comic book. But yeah, there are loads of characters. Like, to be honest, an equivalent is the film Big. That's another one I always used to talk about. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a 1990s film. Tom Hanks basically plays the large version of a child that wishes on Zoltar, a machine, to be big. I think for me that's basically the same as Banana Man, right? He eats a banana because to sort of stop the bullies from picking on him. Yeah, there you go. A therapist would have a field day working out all the connotations of all these cartoons.
Oh well, it's just a good question that gets a feel for you. It's
yeah. It's I think any question that gets you thinking, right? A couple of years ago, I did a podcast called The 10 Lessons Learned, where you had to distill the 10 best lessons from your life to date. And when I signed up for it, I thought, heck, I'm not going to have 10 lessons. And then when I started writing, just on the first draft, I had 47 lessons. And I was like, wow, now I've got to pick which of these are the 10 most impactful lessons that have shaped my life. So it was a really good exercise, even if that, I was like, even if I don't go on the podcast, just to have sat and thought this all through, immensely powerful. And sometimes even the stupidest of questions can really get you thinking about stuff that you probably haven't spent time thinking about.
No, I like that. I really like that one for sure. So just slipping back into the topic at hand here.
Yes.
What is procrastination to you, Faris? How do you define it? And what does it mean to you personally?
To me personally, and I think it's something we're all through to, but I'm a big procrastinator, it is doing something else at the expense of something you should be doing. I'm a big proponent of what we call FQ in my business, Focus Quotient. And Focus Quotient is about making sure you focus on the things that are important to you. Right? So you can't do it if A, you're not clear what is important to you. And B, this is where procrastination comes in as a factor of one of the thieves of Focus Quotient. Now, if you know deep down you've got to really write that presentation, do that thing, but you seem to find yourself over here doing a bunch of other stuff, right? A, that's robbing you of your FQ, but that's a big procrastination. And so that's what procrastination means for me.
And we all know there's no silver bullet, right? There's no one, I hate saying cure and fix all because, I mean, you're not broken and you're not lazy and you don't need to be fixed. It's just your program is a little different. But what is your personal secret sauce for overcoming procrastination?
So it's really funny because I talk a lot about this focus quotient, this FQ. So people come to me and they say to me, oh, yeah, you could really help because I can't stop scrolling on my phone. And I'm like, well, that's not really what I'm talking about, but I can help you with that. But when I'm talking about focus quotient, the number one thing is be clear on your priorities. Literally sit down and write down what your priorities are in which order, right? I'm the kind of idiot that every 6 months writes down my 9 priorities, 9 things that I'm focusing on, have a smart objective, and then prioritize them. Because if you don't have that clarity, of course, you're going to be infused. Anything that comes your way, how can you possibly push it away if you don't know what you want to achieve in life or what you want to achieve even when you sit down? Why are you sat down? Why are you writing that email? Why are you about to have this conversation? Be super clear. What is your objective? What do you want to achieve? And that's the single biggest thing you can do for your focus, in my opinion, and to push away procrastination.
I like how you mentioned the why there. Because, as we all know, and, this is a variation of any number of sayings, but when your why is high, your cost is low. If you don't know why you're doing something, I mean, you're more likely to just not do it. You mentioned something there about the focus quotient about, looking at what your priorities are. And let's be honest, I'm honest, my priorities may not necessarily be the same priorities as what, my job expects of me or what society expects of me. I mean, just talking about tax season, how many of us put that off forever, right? When you're looking at this focus quotient and you're talking about getting clarity, how do you sort of start to figure out what's the most important to you? Is it more of a personal aspect or is it more of a...
So, I mean, from a professional capacity, I go into companies and help them with their focus. So it's their strategic priorities, and it never fails to be the case that I walk in and say, can you just show me or tell me all the strategic projects you're working on as a company? And they get out a list of 200, 300. I'm like, whoa. How can you possibly focus on 200 things simultaneously, right? They can't all be strategically important. And often they know that logically, they just cannot let go of those. But when it comes to my own life, yeah, of course, when I advise people, you need to do your priorities across your whole life. I often do an exercise called the 168 hours with an individual, which is, it doesn't matter if you're a prince or a pauper, you only have 168 hours in a week. First of all, list what are your priorities, and then look back, take the last week. How did you actually spend those 168 hours? Do they correlate to what you said is important in life? If not, right, why not? Right? What can you do about it? And either you're lying about what your priorities are, or more likely you need to make some changes to because otherwise you're not going to hit those priorities.
So there was a little bit of harsh language in there, but it is a major issue when you say that you go back and you say you're lying about your priorities. Yeah. Sometimes it's maybe not that we're lying. Well, I guess it is. We're lying to ourselves, right? But we're taking those priorities what we think they should be. Is that sort of the idea?
Hey, look, I'm not afraid to use harsh language. I'm not a coach. I tell all my clients, I'm very pragmatic. I will tell you what I see, right? I'm not going to here to coach you. If you want to coach, I've got loads of great coaches. But I use that language to really confront people because I've been in that situation, right? Where I've told myself I'll tell you a story shortly about where I first learned about how people lie to themselves. Right? They're not just lying to you and me. They're lying to themselves because they want to believe they are a better version of themselves. So when I was junior, I would tell myself that my priorities were family, health, and my community. But the reality is I was working 18-hour days. And if you really analyzed it, my priorities were promotion, status, money, right? So where did I come up with those things? I came up with those things because those are the things I wanted to be seen as, that I thought society made me sound cool, right? Because I didn't think walking into a bar or meeting a new date and saying, hey, I'm really fixated on money and power and status. Aren't I, attractive to you? And whether I explicit or implicit or wasn't explicit about that, that was what was happening. And, I said I'm going to share a story. I did a project early on in my consulting career, which was around the tobacco industry. Now we can cross that bridge, whether that was a moral thing. But a lot of the strategy that we built was based on the fact we brought 1,000 people in and we asked them a simple question. If we knew they were all smokers, and we said, if you walk into a store and your brand of tobacco that you smoke day in, day out is not in that store, what do you do? And in the interviews, about 90% of them said, if my brand of tobacco is not there, I would leave and go and find another store that sold my brand of tobacco. Okay, great. Just kept coming out. We built a strategy around it. The strategy failed. And we're going through all the assumptions. Why did this fail? And somebody said, well, let's actually create that scenario. Let's bring back those same 1,000 people. Let's create the scenario. Instead of asking them, let's observe them. And we observed them, and 97% of them just bought any tobacco. And then we brought them back into a room and said, why did you tell us in the first interview that you would leave? Because it became clear they genuinely believed that's who they were. They were lying to themselves about the level of their addiction to tobacco and their level of brand loyalty, because they believed that was who they were. They wanted to believe that. So it's not like they were actively sat going, oh, this is what I'll really do. They had told themselves a narrative about themselves that actually wasn't true when it came down to the day-to-day. And I think a lot of us do that, either to protect our ego and to get us through difficult times, make us more conforming to so. So I'm not saying it in a brutal way, but I use that harsh language to maybe help people address things they haven't seen about themselves.
It's interesting that you bring that up, and it brings up a couple of things in my mind. The first thing is that we're often, well, at least it's very popular. Maybe you ran into this sort of thing in police work too. Like if you were protecting somebody and you had to take a bullet for them, would you take a bullet for them?
Yeah.
And the answer is always. Well, of course I would. It's my job. But is it lying to yourself if you've never been in that situation and you're believing that you'd be the best version of yourself in that situation?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And actually, I've got the reverse of that. It's happened. Have you ever been mugged, Chris?
Oh yeah. Just once, but that was enough.
And what did you do in that incident? Did you hand over your stuff? Did you fight? Did you run? What did you do?
Well, I'd always had the bravado, right? I was a whole 18 years old, and I was in Central America, and it was always like, I didn't back down from anybody, because if you back down, then that's when they attack you more and all that fun stuff. I'm into martial arts, and so what happened was we were wandering down the street. It wasn't even that late, and it was about 9 o'clock at night. And we wandered down the street, and there were, I don't even know how many there were in the end. I counted, if I go back and I think about it, and of course the memory is not that great after all those years, it's between 3 and 4. So 2 of them were off on like a lamppost watching, and then the one guy came up behind me and held a gun to my head. Like he put me in a, and
Wow.
I'm guessing there must have been 2 people behind, because the first thing they did was the one guy pulled my hands up over my head like this, and he had me in like a full Nelson. And then I felt the cold steel against my temple, right? So what am I going to do? I just, I didn't do anything. I just froze pretty much. And I'm like, well, I didn't even think anything in my head, right?
Yeah.
It was just, it was all over in a matter of seconds. They flipped through my pockets. They emptied them. That was that pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? I've been in that situation. I've been mugged twice, once at knife point, once at gunpoint. I was always taught as a kid, just hand over stuff. Nothing is worth your life, right? Doesn't matter even if you're carrying $1,000 or whatever, you've just emptied your bag, just hand it over. So that was ingrained in me, and that's what I thought I would do. But both those instances, I fought, and I never knew that was even in me, because I'm not a fighter. But in those 2 situations, and that's what I mean about it's not lying to yourself, but you don't know until the situation sometimes, and so it's very, very strange.
And then the second part of that is, it could be like a company loyalty thing too, right? Like they want to think they're doing the right thing, but they've just never been in that situation like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The other part of that is that, and this is really fascinating to me because I love pulling it up in terms of procrastination and in terms of just life in general, is we judge ourselves based on our intentions.
Yes.
We judge others based on their actions. So if you look at your actions and you pretended like you didn't know yourself, what would those actions imply?
Say about you, yeah. It's like I always chuckle to myself. I don't know if you're a single guy or in a relationship. Chris, I'm a single guy, and so I bet I've been on and continue to be on dating apps. And the reason I bring this up is dating apps. An exact example of this. There's always a place on a dating app where it says list your hobbies, and people write their hobbies, and I'm like, are those actually their hobbies or the things they'd like to believe in themselves that they do? And so often, I don't fill in that section because I know that most people lie, right? They'll say, oh, I'm really into reading books and going to the theater. And then you'll say to them, if you do happen to go on a date or you're chatting, when was the last time you went to the theatre? And they'll go like 2 years ago. And you go, so that's not a hobby, right? Or when was the last time? I think far more powerful is actually show me your calendar from the last 2 weeks. I'll tell you what your hobbies are. Rather than, but that's the bit, right? People like to have a romantic view of themselves, what they intend to do, not what they actually do.
And so how does that play into, let's go back to your example of the company with the FQ, 200 strategic, 200 strategic projects. How did you start to narrow those down for them? Or how did they start?
So I often use the same technique because they know they shouldn't be doing it. So it's not it's not that I have to go in and debate. So it's not an IQ battle. It's an EQ, an emotional battle. Each of those projects has an emotional reason why they started it. The CEO sponsored it. This one is really important to help me get a promotion. This one is, so they all came about for a reason. And so it's about helping reframe it so they let go. So often what we'll do when we encounter this problem is we'll go away, we'll take all their projects, we'll ask for the data that sits behind their projects, so all the business cases they've written, all the things that say, do you know what, this project will take 6 months, it will deliver this much revenue, it will cost this much. And I will turn each of those into a deck of Pokemon cards. Each will have a picture, a Pokemon. Have you ever played Pokemon cards? Are you aware of these?
No,
It's the top trumps you used to play as a kid, if you know those, right? You get a deck of cards, they have statistics on them, you read out the statistics. If your statistic is higher than the other one, you win the person's card. If it's lower, they win the card. So we'll turn the deck and we'll play Pokemon in the boardroom for an hour, 2 hours. The whole point being, there are cards there that will keep losing. These people will get frustrated with the cards that get losing. And I'll say there's a simple solution. If you want to make your hand better, let's get rid of those cards, right? It never fails. In an hour, we'll get from 200 down to 50. And those projects will never see light of day again. Okay, they might have to close them down, right? But what we're doing is helping reframe, refocus, take emotion out of it, see it in a different light. And that's the single biggest thing I can help them to be more focused, not specifically around procrastination, but to be more focused.
Right. And I'm guessing those are emotional factors and also monetary factors and things like that.
Yeah, other things like that. Yeah. There's a whole host of reasons why these projects came up.
And what do you suppose is the most difficult thing in letting those projects go? Would you consider it the emotional aspect, or would you consider it some other aspect?
In my experience, it's often the emotional. For some people, it's sunk cost fallacy. It's it depends when you hit that project. For some people, it could be they've been working on it for 4 years. Forget that they spent millions on it. It's been 4 years of their life. Right? They want to see it to completion, but it serves no benefit to the company anymore. It's a bit like trying to roll out, we're going to put faxes in every office. Well, it's the 21st century. We no longer need faxes. It doesn't matter that you spent 10 years working on faxes, right? You have to let it go. I remember as a junior consultant, and I often tell this, to junior consultants, one of the sort of toughest moments of early in my career is I'd spent 3 months working on a model, developed a whole bunch of analysis, showed it to my boss, who used the phrase, "That's really good. It's good enough. We're going to put it in the appendix," right? Which was basically, because the project had moved on, that was no longer relevant for solving the problem, right? It didn't matter that I'd spent 3 months of my life. They needed me to spend 3 months of my life to prove it wasn't important, right? So for the client, it wasn't relevant. But for me, it'd been my universe for 3 months, hard, right? And so you've got to look at it from the client's point of view. That's not going anywhere near the final pack that we send them. So we'll put it in the appendix in case they ever want to look at it as a nice reference. And that's a harsh reality, right? It's not about my emotions and where it's found. I was still getting paid for those 3 months, right? I had a good job, so it's dealing with that emotional side of it is often the hardest part of letting go of stuff.
And how important is it in your focus? How important is it to balance the different projects plus downtime? Because, we mentioned we all have 168 hours a week. How important is that downtime or that, every company is different. Like some have sprints, some have, dedicated blocks, but how important is it to have that sort of downtime?
Well, let's put it this way. People forget that life is a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're always sprinting, you're not going to make the finish line. So it's okay to sprint from time to time, right? And at times in your life, you're going to have to sprint. But if you're not baking in the downtime, if you're not baking down the thinking time, right, something is going to pop at some point, and you don't want to be you don't want that to be the reason you take downtime. And so, the other reality is people aren't going to come along and tell you ahead of time. They'll usually only step in when things have gone wrong. So you've got to be your own barometer.
Hmm.
And a lot of people find that really difficult.
And just going back to focus here, you touched on something really interesting.
Yeah, sure.
When you talk about, good versus bad versus useful versus not useful. But what would you say is the oh man, I just forgot the question for a second. Give me a second. Wow, that is horrible. So, what would you say is the most difficult aspect when you're trying to get clarity in that sense? Because again, things are shifting all the time. Do you go back to the company mission, or do you go back to the vision?
Yeah, vision and missions are great places, right? Now, I don't want to get caught on semantics. What's the difference between a vision and a mission? But ultimately, you need to know where you're headed, right? That is your anchor at all times, and it shouldn't be changing so rapidly. If it's changing so rapidly, you need to go up a level, right? So, and what I often give an example using my own life, right? I said my vision might be to be the best version of myself, and my current mission is that involves losing weight or learning a language. Right. And so I've got to remember that all the decisions I'm making have to flow back to me losing weight. So anytime I go out for a meal, flows back to that. Anytime I'm going out for a drink, flows back to that. Anytime I've sat and I've got a choice of do I watch a movie or go to the gym, flows back to that. And yet, in a year from now, I might substitute that mission for another one. Okay, that one I've ticked. Now my mission is all about getting a promotion. Right. Is everything I'm doing flowing back to that? So if you haven't worked that out, spend time there, right? There's a great quote by Albert Einstein. I said to all my clients, he once said, if I only had an hour to save the world and my life depended on it, I'd spend at least 55 minutes working out what the problem is, because then it's easy. But too many people spend 55 minutes just doing stuff.
Actually, that's something as well. We can all be busy, like you said, 200 projects, and you're probably busy all the time, but you're not doing anything. So do you see that as a major issue in a lot of companies, that they just they're busy, but they're not really doing anything?
Yeah, a lot of companies are set up to measure activity, not output. And there's a hero status around I worked late, I did all this, I got you, not on I moved the dial. I got us one step closer. I don't care if you only worked an hour, but you got me closer to my goal than the person who worked 24 hours and didn't really get us anywhere. Because it's hard to rewire that, B, to measure it. Until you hit the goal, measuring the steps towards the goal can sometimes be really hard. But you can always measure the inputs, the effort. So we
What do you think is the most challenging aspect of reshifting that essential focus, and what do you think is the biggest challenge?
getting alignment. Yeah, so you need to cross the hurdle yourself. So it's one thing I can say, look, yeah, I want to lose weight. Brilliant. Right. I've got a clarity and I make the decisions. But if you don't take others on the journey with you, it's going to be awfully hard. Yeah. I do want to lose weight. I do want to get fitter. But if I don't get my mum on board, who is a great cook and is constantly baking cakes and, bring her, then it's going to be infinitely harder. So she's become suddenly part of the project. Right. As do all my friends. So they don't pressurize me to have an extra drink. Right. So getting alignment, getting buy-in, as well as getting yourself clear on what you want to do is the next big hurdle you have to cross.
And when we're doing this, when we're trying to get these goals, when we're trying to get this focus reshifted, what do you do when there's not a lot of buy-in agreement? Because we often have this, and that might be the reason why they had 200 projects to begin with. You have the CEO that's got 50, you've got the HR person's got 20.
Yeah. You've got to do joined up, right? People need to feel involved in the decision making and see the bigger picture. Doesn't matter where they are. Now, I'm not saying everyone in a company should be involved in every decision, but so there's some sort of ownership is what we are always encouraging and work with leaders to do. Get your team involved. Don't have the superhero effect where you go into a room on your own, develop a plan and go, da-da, I've done all the thinking. No need to thank me. Actually, they won't thank you. They'll hate you and they'll dismiss your ideas because it's not their ideas. I often talk about a phenomenon that I first learned about, which I call the Apple iPad phenomenon. So when Apple originally opened their stores and they were selling the original iPads, they had a strategy where they would purposely leave all the iPads 2 to 3 degrees askew. Okay. The thinking being that when somebody walked in and they saw an iPad askew, what do you think they did, Chris?
Well, I mean, the psychopath answer for me would be to straight.
Yeah, most people would. It's like seeing a painting that's slightly, they would walk over and straighten it. And the reason Apple wanted them to do that is as soon as a person touched an iPad, they were 4 times as likely to buy it. And I say to leaders, okay, it's a Machiavellian sales technique, but in strategy or developing an idea, leave it 2, 3, 4% askew. Let your team touch it and straighten it. They'll feel like they own it. And so, yeah, if I want to get my mum's buy-in around me losing weight, I need to help her feel like she owns that. It was her idea as much as my idea.
So like an Inception style thing.
It's like an Inception style, yeah. Just having a frank conversation with her. Instead of going to her saying, I've made this bold declaration, I want to lose weight. Say, Mum, these are things that are important in my life. What do you think I should do? And come to the conclusion together that you should lose weight or get fitter. Great. Can you help me with that, Mum? Oh, yeah, I can. Brilliant. That's an easier conversation. And I've made this decision. I am now telling you my decision. I need you on board. So it's a nuance, but it makes a hell of a difference.
Well, I can see how that makes a difference because, being human beings, most of us like to have our autonomy. And when we're told we have to do something, there's that instant resistance, right? So I can see that. I can definitely see that. You've obviously had a lot of success in creating your company and raising it up. What do you think is the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself? Because we all know that as you're working with clients, you get things that rock around in the old noggin. What's the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself in your years there?
God, I've learned so much. I think building a business is about tackling your own demons. You can't build a business if you have fixed narratives. And loads of us do. I can't do that. Couldn't possibly do that. I'm not good at that. Well, buddy, you're going to have to bridge those gaps, get comfortable with it, because if you don't, then particularly in the early days, if you don't have a team, it ain't going nowhere. And the biggest one people have is, I don't like selling. I don't like knocking on doors. So I learned about myself. Actually, I do enjoy that, right? Just by reframing it, I enjoy not just the challenge of landing, but actually reframing it as, this is a great way to go and just meet more people, have an excuse to go and talk to more people. And I love talking to new people. So actually, I kind of unleashed a demon in me to just keep networking, keep meeting new people, keep talking about the business. And I never really saw that in me prior before.
Interesting. I like that. I like that. Figuring out a way to put a positive spin on it. Stumbled over that for a second. And when you're doing that, and we said that it's important to have not too many fingers in the pie or too many cooks in the kitchen, but you want to have them 2 or 3% to be able to touch it and see how they're going to mold it.
Yeah.
How important is it to get external feedback in those instances? Like you have your internal team, but what about external, like public panels or things like that?
Yeah, it's always good. The more important the decision, get more people, involvement, right? Get more feedback and a variety of feedbacks. I've been doing war games and strategic thinking for clients for years. And the one thing that comes clear, if we just get the same group of people to sit in a room and play a war game or do some strategic thinking, they'll come up with the answers they've always come up. Right? And so I will always say, can I get a team from the shop floor? Can I get a team of your graduates? Because they think differently. They're not beset by this, this is how we've always done it. And then it's only then that we kick on the thinking. And this happens time and time again. So it's the same. Of course, talk to your closest friends, but I bet you'll probably already know their answers. Go and talk to some strangers. Now, I'm not saying take one stranger's opinion. I would say be like a journalist. A journalist would never publish a story. I always train from a journalist. Never publish a story based on one source. Never change your business. Never make a decision based on one input, one person's opinion. But if you hear 10 people all saying the same thing, there's a pretty big clue you should start making some changes. So yeah, get more people involved, more diverse people involved.
And what would you say to a listener out there who maybe has a small business or medium-sized business, and they're looking to make some decisions and they're having some analysis paralysis?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? The beauty nowadays is you are not alone ever because of generative AI. And so I often say to the solopreneur, you now have 20 different voices just by typing, right? Literally, you can type a prompt saying, give me 20 completely different opinions on this idea that I'm just about to tell you. And if that doesn't help you, at least kick your ass a little bit on paralysis, even out of curiosity, just do it with any of your ideas. you'll be amazed at what comes back, and hopefully it will give you some impetus. Analysis paralysis can happen for so many reasons. One might be because you emotionally don't want to do something, but the other might be you're so overwhelmed with options that you go, it's easier just to bury my head in sand. It's called the ostrich effect. So yeah, just play around with ChatGPT, play around, or any other Gen AI. I'm not here to promote one over the other. It will give you loads of opinions, but it'll also, even if you just ask it the question, which of these would you do? Right? And I always say, basically, life is one giant experiment. So if you've got a list of 10 things and just work your way through those 10 things. Week 1, just try number 1, right? Monitor, is it successful? If not, switch to number 2. And if that's successful, keep doing it. If not, switch to number 3. But one of the reasons a lot of us stick is because we've only got one option. And when it doesn't work, we're like, well, that didn't work, right? I was proved right. So I'm just going to sit on my hands.
You bring up an interesting point. So when we're working with AI and we're trying to use AI to sort through things, to what extent do you say that it's kind of acceptable to use AI, and when you should get more human?
Well, I mean, it's always acceptable to use AI, I'd say, but don't forget that we make things happen through humans. So even if you could do it with AI, why not get a bunch of humans together? So you might go down the AI route if you want speed, if it's not easy to get people, save cost. But if you can, just grab 3 friends, go to the pub. You're getting 2 outputs from 1 input. You're getting social time. You're also getting those ideas. A lot of what I could do, I could just do in a room on my own. We're interacting with very few people, but I choose to swim against that and actually bring more interaction in because I know that will have other benefits.
And just as a segue to that, where do you see your own where do you see your own business going in the next 5 years with AI?
Yeah, with AI, yeah, so we are currently me and a team of 6. I aspire in the next 5 years to grow that out to about a team of 30, put more into the brand. So I personally will stop delivering so much of the work. And so I can build out the business. And, AI has always been a thought partner, for our first 5 years of the business, to stress test our workshops, our ideas, get some new ideas and how we can break biases in teams. So we'll remain to that. But yes, that's the next 5 years. But beyond that, I'm starting to see some amazing AIs that can give live feedback, which is very similar to the kind of work we do with individuals. So, I like to think we can harness that rather than see it as a competitor. And that's where I think we will evolve over time as a business.
I like that. You're looking more to enhance and augment rather than replace. Do you think there's a big fear? Or do you think the fear is warranted, I think is a better way to phrase it, about AI completely replacing certain industries and jobs?
I don't know. There are better people. I think there's a healthy fear, but I think we over-egg it. I don't think there'll always be jobs for us. I think we may have to retrain or pivot a little bit. So that will never go away. But will it involve some discomfort? Probably. And most of us dislike change and discomfort. So we will be. That's why I try and get all my clients to start using AI. It's amazing how many of them, particularly very senior people, will talk about it. And when I say, have you actually used it? It's a bit like those hobbies thing. I'll be like, when was the last time you actually used it? Oh, I've never had. Okay, well, in the next meeting, we're all going to use it. All right? Just to help you get a bit more comfortable, to be that, touch it a bit. So you're no longer talking about it as though it's as it's an alien. At least if you've touched it, you can be a bit more informed, but you'll also be pleasantly surprised at how it changes to other meetings that we have together.
Would you say that there's one thing or any one thing or a few things that you definitely shouldn't use AI for?
I think the reasons not to use it is is the data you're giving to somebody else to inform it. But in terms of using, and a bit like what I said about journalism earlier, don't just sit there and go, if whatever AI tells me, I'll do. Use the same critical thinking. And that's a skill that we'll always need to have, right? And so use the same critical thinking for any of the outputs that AI generates, right? Don't take its first answer ever.
No, I like that one. Don't take its first answer ever. I mean, have you ever run across where it's giving you a second a different answer if you ask it the same thing? Is that why you're saying that?
Yeah. So first of all, run it multiple times, see the different answers, but ask it, how could you be wrong? In the newer forms of AI, it has self-analysis. So it would be like, I could be wrong in these 3 areas. Okay, tell me more about that. How would you fix you being wrong in those areas? What better question could I have asked you? People don't understand that how you interact with AI, and I was taught this by I'm still no expert, but my AI guru, it's like an assistant. You need to have the conversations you would have with a junior employee. Give it feedback, talk to it, explore. Why did you think like that? All right. Explain to me. And by doing that, and that's what I mean, don't just take its first answer. I don't just mean run it multiple times. I mean, deep dive into the answer it's given you with AI, right? So maybe 10 questions to AI to be confident of the answer it's given you. Go, okay, now I've understood. Ask it to list its sources. Ask it to the sort of things you would ask a junior. That's the bit that people miss. They just think, it's not Google search, right? It's a different medium that we need to interact with.
Gotcha. And, I appreciate that you brought that up, that, you need to talk to it. You need to fine tune it, because it's definitely not out of the box by any means. Might be someday, but it's not yet. This has been a really great conversation, Faris. We're coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you feel we should have discussed that we didn't touch on today, or any questions you feel I should have asked?
A whole heap of stuff, Chris, but always leave, as my dad always said, always leave something for next time, right? And so, look, I think I've really enjoyed our conversation as well. We've covered quite a nice range of topics, and I'd be delighted to carry on the conversation with you, all the listeners. And if they want to do that, then they can look me up either on LinkedIn, where there's only one Faris Aranki, and I post every day little tips around focus, around IQ, around EQ. Or they can come and look up the company that I run, which is called Shigeto, which is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone, because our raison d'etre is to sharpen other human beings. So come and find us. We'll put the links in I'm sure, in the summary. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for that, Faris. And as he mentioned, don't worry about grabbing a pen and paper. We are going to have that in the show notes. Well, once again, just thank you so much for being on the show, Faris. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.